How's it going, everybody? Jake from UK Barrow Conversions here. Today's video I thought I would go through how to convert your Barrow to being powered using one of our budget kits. Now there's a variety of ways, of course, that you can power convert your Barrow. We sell a couple of different options, a couple of different kits. We do a premium kit that comes with higher end batteries, a fancier wheel, and also pre-made converted adapted forks that are ready to bolt on. Alternatively, if you want to save a bit of money, you can use one of our budget kits. So these budget kits come in at $3.99, so they are a bargain, and it includes absolutely everything you need to power convert your Barrow on a budget. So it does mean there's going to be a bit of DIY involved. So if you're wanting something that's ready to go, ready to fit, this probably isn't for you. Take a look at one of our premium kits. However, if you're happy to save a little bit of money, spend a little bit of time, then you can do it on a much cheaper budget. And this here is a Carporter Mark II that I'm going to be converting today. As you can see, it's completely original front wheel, nothing fitted apart from an aftermarket pannier bag, which we also sell, which I'll come on to later in the video. But otherwise, this Barrow is ready to be converted using our budget kit, which includes everything just here. So we'll go through step by step what you need to do to convert your Barrow. Right, so first things first, we need to remove the front fork and wheel assembly. Really easy on most Barrows. You usually have, hopefully if I move this pannier bag out the way, you have an adjuster knob that you can see just here, which holds the tension. So we're just going to slacken those right off, both sides. And then we're going to lift the Barrow up and pull the forks out of place, like so. So the next step after that is to disassemble the wheel from the forks entirely. On the Carporter, these are 19mm, but this size can vary, of course. So this part here is probably what most would consider as the hardest part or most intimidating. And truth be told, it's actually not too bad at all. And that is figuring out a way to fit your adapter plates. Now, the adapter plates are needed because most Barrows, like the Carporter, for example, it's a physical impossibility to be able to mount the power wheel because of the way the wheel mounts is completely different. So you need the adapter plates to be able to use your original forks to mount the actual power wheel itself. Now, one thing before you go too far, before you commit, is to make sure that you've physically got enough width to be able to use this kit. And what I mean by that is the power wheels are naturally going to be wider than most factory wheel setups. And certain Barrows, like the Carporters, for example, are great because what they do is they make the wheels wider, or they make the forks wider apart, and they use spacers to fit a narrower wheel. Which means in most cases the forks are still wide apart enough to be able to fit a power wheel. However, the likes of the Fox Explorer, for example, that has a really narrow wheel, but they don't use any spacers, so the forks are also very close together, meaning it's a physical impossibility to mount a power wheel because you haven't got enough width. So we do have a list in the description that you can see that we've written down of pretty much every Barrow that we can think of that this kit will be suitable for in terms of width. If you are unsure if this is going to be suitable for your Barrow, feel free to ask before purchase, or even better, get us some measurements and we can confirm whether or not we believe this is going to fit. Moving on, so we've got the Mark II forks here, and now I'm going to figure out how I'm going to fit them. Now, usually what I'd probably do is I'd weld them on, but obviously I understand most people haven't got the facilities or a welder physically in their garage. So we're going to go through the nut and bolt method. This is supplied with hardware, mounting hardware, everything you need to be able to nut and bolt it. So we're going to go through that method and drill some holes in the factory forks. Now, on these Carporter Mark II fork legs, you can see, as I mentioned, they've got the spacer tube pre-welded on there. Now, you can cut this off, but I'm actually not going to do that. I'm going to go through an easier method. I'm going to move it, so instead of the fork sitting like that on the Barrow, it's now going to sit like this. So the captive nut is now going to be at the front instead of on the side. And this spacing tube, it might look a little bit odd, but he's going to be out of the way and he's not going to cause any interference whatsoever. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to make sure that where I mount the fork mounting bracket is going to avoid that spacing tube because that is pressed all the way through. And that means otherwise I'd have to drill for even more steel, and I don't need to. And the reason why I'm not going through this mounting hole itself, instead of going like this, for example, and chopping this off and going nut and bolt, is because this is a lot larger than this hole. And I want to guarantee and just make sure that everything's nice and tight, everything's drilled to the exact precise size it needs to be, because obviously the power wheels do deliver quite a lot of torque. I don't want anything flexing or moving. So, on this fork in particular, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this cap out at the bottom just to give me a bit more room. I'm going to make sure that where I'm mounting it, as you can see, is just avoiding this hole here, so I don't have to drill through that. As you can see, once I've popped that plastic cap out just there, it's going to give me a little bit more leeway on my slotted section. So that's another nice thing, is you've got plenty of room here, up and down movement for the wheel itself. You don't need an awful lot for the wheel to physically go all the way on to be nice and tight. So don't worry if you've got what I'd call like a little bit of overhang on your fork leg just there. That's absolutely fine. What you can do, of course, as well, is you can get the wheel itself and just make sure where you're physically wanting to mount it, make sure that it's engaging enough onto the actual axle of the wheel. But I know for a fact that this is going to be absolutely fine. So what I'd recommend to do is get yourself a Sharpie or a marker or something like that, so you can mark everything up, and then make sure that you're taking measurements. So I've got to take measure just here, making sure that you're taking measurements on both sides to make sure you're trying to get it as square and as even as possible. If you're a few mil out, that's absolutely fine. It's not the be all end all. These things are Chinese anyway, obviously, like the steel and everything that's used, so you have got quite a degree of leniency, but you want to try and make sure that you're trying to get as close to intolerance as possible to make sure that everything's going to align correctly. So let's get to mounting these brackets on. Okay, so I'm happy with the measurements I've taken. That is near enough as dead square as I can make it. I've got my markings ready, so I know where the top of the plate's going to be, and I've marked out where my holes are also going to be. So what I'm going to do now off camera, I'm not going to bother obviously recording myself drilling it on camera. What I'd recommend for you guys as well is use a smaller drill bit to begin with. So use something like a 2.5 or a 3mm drill bit to drill your pilot hole. Obviously go all the way through both sides. So because obviously your plate is, you're bolting the plate on, so you need to go through both sides. And then obviously after that you can then follow it up with the 8mm drill bit and go all the way through. So let's get this drilled, and then let's get the adapter plates bolted on. Right, so our holes have been drilled. We've got our adapter plates on, as you can see. The only thing I have done, you don't have to do this, is I have just given it a quick spray paint. You can see that paint's still drying, just to ensure that the holes that I've drilled are also painted and coated, just to prevent rust. There is one mistake I have made that you'll probably have just noticed, which is the way round I've done the bolts. I should have done them opposing, but I've done them both the same way round. Realistically makes no difference, but this is something I can correct anyway in a second off camera. But these fork legs are now ready. They're ready to take a power wheel. So let's get the power wheel assembled, and then let's figure out if we need any spacers to fit it to the actual Barrow itself. Okay, so we have our Barrow upside down just to make it a little bit easier for me. And we have our new fork legs, or rather original fork legs with custom adapters. And we're just going to slot those on. Now, one oversight that I have noticed, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to include this in the video anyway, because this is the trials and tribulations of a DIY kit, is where this captive nut, as you can see just here, the captive nut, which originally was sideways like so, is now at the front. I don't have quite enough room to actually physically fit it. You can see that the actual chassis is in the way now. So there are a couple of resolutions to this. My resolution is either use an actual bolt, but to be honest with you, the problem is with using a bolt is, of course, you're then going to need to take a tool with you every time you want to dismantle it, or you can check this beforehand, which stupidly I didn't do, but as I mentioned, these are the trials and tribulations. Alternatively, you can get these online off eBay. So they're an M8 and they're a much smaller size, as you can see by comparison, to the normal size thumb screw. These still do the same thing, so you can still get your fingers around them to undo them. I don't know what they're called, unfortunately. I'm sure one of you can probably let me know in the comments. But these are available on eBay. We've got a load of them in stock, and I'm going to use one of those instead. And you'll see that it just about clears, and I can now fully tighten up the fork leg onto the chassis itself, like so. Right, now that we've got our fork legs bolted on, we can now attach our wheel. And this is the part where we find out if we need any spacers. Now, I'll be completely truthful with you. I know the Carporter Mark II with these adapter plates, I know I don't need any spacers, but I will show you and display how it would work anyway. This wheel that I'm using is a used wheel, saves me from having to use a brand new one because I am going to get this mucky shortly by using it outside. So you'll see a bit of dirt on it, but you can ignore that for video purposes. We want to make sure that we always have the power lead is going to be on the right hand side of the Barrow once it's actually upright. So I know for a fact that needs to be this side, and we're going to go ahead and fit it. You'll see on the wheel itself there are a couple of spacers or washers. These need to go on the outside. These are just basically load washers. They're not used as spacers. So we're going to slacken the two nuts either side right off, and we're going to go ahead and try and fit this actually onto the wheel itself, or onto the forks rather itself. Now you do have the hardware that does get in the way a little bit, And of course you can do this either way. You can either put the forks onto the wheel first and then attach it to the chassis of the Barrow, or you can do it the way that I've done. I've done it this way just to give you an idea as to how you'll know if you need spacers. And you can see, hopefully, you've got a bit of a gap here at the moment. If I zoom in a little bit, you can see there's a little bit of a gap just here, but obviously with these type of forks that they do pull in quite a lot as you tighten them up. So what I would advise, if you feel that you've got a bit of a gap and you're unsure, obviously this fork needs to be tight up to this wheel. Start trying to tighten it up, like I will do in a second, and what you want to confirm is make sure that the wheel isn't binding up once you rotate it. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move this up a bit, because at the moment the nut was just catching against the actual chassis itself. And of course we also want to make sure that we're getting the wheel on as square as possible as well. So let's just get these nuts nipped up. So I've only done that finger tight for now, and hopefully you can already see just on camera, if I move that down, you can see that that is now flush up against the wheel, whereas before there was a big gap. So that confirms that we don't need any spacers. Another thing you can do to confirm this as well is if you rotate the wheel and it spins freely, and it's flush up against the actual hub of the wheel itself, you know everything's all good, that's all kosher. If you're finding it's pulling in too much, what it might do is it might cause the wheel to bind up and be hard to rotate. As you can see, this needs no pressure to rotate whatsoever. If you're finding yours is hard to rotate, then you may need some spacers to take up that little bit of a gap that you've got, and you're not then pulling the forks in, which is going to put everything under load. So now that we know that we don't need any spacers, we can go ahead and tighten this up. Obviously you want to try and make sure the wheel is as equal as possible in terms of height, because of course these are slotted so you can adjust this. So you want to visually just double check and make sure that by eye he looks that it's pretty much straight, rather than if it's on the wonk, obviously it's going to try and pull to the one side a little bit. So we'll get a spanner on these and we'll get these finally tightened up. It's a 22mm spanner to tighten these up, or alternatively of course you can use mole grips if required. You do want to make sure they're tight, but if you're finding it's tightening up and then binding the wheel up, maybe slacking it off a little bit, or as I mentioned previously, make sure that you don't need any spacers. So I'm happy with that, that's nice and tight. Wheel spins freely, as we can still see. So that is the hard part technically done, and now we can look at mounting our ECU, our throttle and our batteries. Right, so now we're onto the wiring side. Now, whenever something includes batteries or wiring, I think some people can find this intimidating, but when I say this is easy and it's an absolute doddle, I mean it, it really is. Now on the ECUs that we use, you have 3 connectors. You have one for the wheel, you have one for the throttle, and you have one for the battery connector itself. You also get, of course, you get 2 Ultramax batteries, and these are proper LiFePo 4 batteries as well. They're not cheap crap lead acid batteries. These are the real deal. They're proper batteries to make sure they're going to last a decent amount of time. And you get an ECU bag as well. And just about you can squeeze everything in. The only complaint I will say, or the only thing I will say ourselves that isn't ideal, is unfortunately the hole that's on the ECU bag isn't quite large enough to physically fit any of the plugs through, unfortunately. So what I tend to do is I put everything in and I go for a small gap in the zip section. So what I'm going to do here, I'll face it this way around so you can see it on camera. I'm going to place both of my batteries in like so, nice and easy. Our ECU is lovely, small and compact. That's going to go in at the very, very top just here as well. And then all we have here is our battery joining cable. So on our ECU we have an XT90 connector, which we also have here. We're going to plug him in. What I'm going to do quickly before I go too far is I'm going to remove the fuse just to make sure nothing's got power until I want it to have power. So I'm going to pull the fuse out the inline fuse holder. And we've got spade connectors on the battery terminals. So you've got positive on one end, negative on the other. So these go to the opposing battery. So we've got a positive from one battery and negative to the other. And then what we also have is a daisy chain cable to join them both in series. So then instead of having 12 volt, we've got two 12 volt, which makes 24 volt, of course. Now, it doesn't matter which way around they go, but they are heat shrink ready and you're joining them together. So negative goes onto the black, positive goes to the red. And our batteries and our ECU are quite literally ready to go at that point. All we've got to do is remember to put the fuse in when we're ready, and we're ready to power this up. So what I'll do now is we'll get all this cable Now, of course, you can tidy this away in different ways and better ways. I'm just going to shove him in there for now. We're going to zip this up like so, and we've got a very small gap, as I say, to allow our power lead for our wheel and for our throttle through. And that is all nice and easy and compact. That is everything wiring wise sorted for your ECU side. So all we've got to do is plug in a wheel and plug in a throttle, and it is that simple. So let's get this popped into the Barrow somewhere. So on carporters, you have a few options as to where you can pop your ECU and battery bag. You have these big central bags here, the drop-in bags, or alternatively, we sell these pannier bags. They fit a wide variety of Barrows. We sell these online for about 25 quid, I think. They're not a lot of money. The lovely thing about these is it utilises a space that isn't usually used right up at the front, and they have pockets either side that are just about big enough to fit one of these in, like so. Like I say, it is a tight fit, but you will go in eventually like that. Okay, and now that we've mounted our ECU in place, what we can do is attach our wheel plug. Now we want to try and do this as neat as possible so it roots out of the way, it's not going to interfere or get caught up in anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up through this gap just here, pull all the excess cable through. What I'll do in a moment, you get a bunch of cable ties supplied with the kit, so I'll cable tie the excessive wire to the fork leg itself. And here we're going to connect the Deutsch connector. Now, this will only go one way, so if you're trying to connect it the wrong way, you're fighting against it and it won't connect, then you've probably got it the wrong way around. If you get it the correct way around, it will just sleeve in lovely like this, like so. Being a Deutsch connector, this is watertight, this is a proper connector, means it's all dismantleable as well, so if you need to take the Barrow apart to get it into your car, for example, you can dismantle it like you could from factory. To dismantle it or to remove the front wheel, you're just going to push these two tabs in at the top and bottom here and pull, like so. And you can now remove your front forks from your Barrow along with your wheel like you could do from factory, which is another really nice feature. So we'll connect that back up. What we're going to do, all that excessive wire and cable, we're just going to put into the actual bag, the pannier bag here, like so. And then I'm just going to tidy away the excessive cable up to the fork leg by cable tying it. And that's the wheel side all done. So all we've got left to worry about now is the throttle. So we'll get onto that now. So here we have our throttle mount. These are really, really nice and simple. They sleeve around like so. You've got two rubber pads that are included. You don't have to use these, but there's two rubber pads that are included in the box with the throttle mount. And those are just to make sure that it doesn't vibrate and do any damage to the actual powder coating of the frame. Obviously completely up to you whether or not you use those. And then you've just got a 6mm Allen key to tighten it up. There's a grub screw on the inside here, so that sleeves over like so. You can obviously adjust the position. I'm going to put it right as far back as it can go because that's where I like it. And I'm just going to tighten up the Allen key in here. Right, so that's tight enough. You don't have to go too crazy, you just need to nip it up. What you want to make sure is as you're pushing down, because of course you're going to be applying downward pressure to the thumb throttle, that it's not going anywhere. That's nice and firm on there, that's not going anywhere. And now we can attach our throttle. Now our throttle's held on by a 2.5mm Allen key grub screw. And again, you want to just make sure that he slides on all the way like so. Now, position wise, you can of course adjust this. I'm going to roughly go here for now. That's what I'm happy with. We're going to just tighten up that Allen key screw just here. There we go, that's better. That's not moving anywhere now. So all we need to do now is wire this along, or route it along rather, and then plug that into the ECU. And then the only thing we've got to do is connect our fuse back up and we're ready to go. Okay, so the throttle cable, or the throttle wire rather, is about 1 metre long. So what I will advise, if you do have something like a triporter, for example, you may need to extend this a little bit because it is only so long. As you can see on this Mark II, it's just got enough room with having a little bit of slack in the cable still to be comfortable. Because on the ECU side, this is about all the length you have, unfortunately. Now there is a Woodruff key, or a slot rather I should say, on the inside, so it will locate only one way. So make sure you're lining it up correctly by looking at it and slotting it in. And then you have a collar nut that simply tightens up. Make sure he's nice and tight by hand. That again ensures a nice tight watertight connection. Now we're done with the pannier bag. Aside from, as I mentioned, putting the fuse back in, which I'll do off camera in a moment. But for video purposes, we'll close that up and say that we're done. Nice and easy. And now all we need to do is just cable tie this wire up for the actual throttle itself, and we're ready to go. Okay, so now it's time for the moment of truth. We've pressed the power button. We've got lights, which is a good sign. Do we have throttle? Yes, we do. It's trying to take off on its own, which is exactly what we want. So we know that's powered up and that's all working. Now, obviously, as I load the throttle up, you might see the green light go out. That's completely normal because, of course, when it's under load, then, of course, it's going to drain the battery a little bit. And one thing I haven't done, which we highly recommend, is to charge the batteries up before you use it. Chargers, of course, are included for both batteries. Make sure it's fully charged before you go on a proper adventure. And there you have it. That is your Barrow converted. I'm using the exact Barrow I've just converted here with the budget kit. And the good thing is about this kit, yes, it's definitely cheap, but it's not cheap in terms of quality. It's proper parts, you know, CNC laser machined plates, not some dodgy cut up bits of steel, lithium batteries, waterproof connectors so it can be dismantled and used time and time again. It's a budget way of doing it, but it's not budget in the aspect of quality. It's a proper bit of kit. And having a powered Barrow really does help massively, especially for those ones where you've got to go on a long old walk and lug all your gear. You know, initially having a Barrow in itself is a luxury, but having it powered is a different ballpark entirely. And you know, you don't have to spend a whole ton of money. You don't have to buy a pre-powered Barrow. If you've got a Barrow that you love, you can buy one of our DIY kits, and if you're handy, you can fit it yourself, save a lot of money. If you don't want to, you know, DIY and you want a premium kit, aka everything ready to bolt on, ready to go, we have those as well. So you don't necessarily have to go down this route. You can go down the premium route if you wish, if you want everything just to bolt up magically. So there we have it, one converted Barrow ready to go. And like I was saying, you don't have to do it this route. If you want to go down the route of spending a little bit more money and having something that's ready to go, so forks are pre-done for you, custom-made forks, a fancier throttle with an LED display and an odometer, and longer lasting batteries, then take a look at our premium kits. We do a premium kit for pretty much most Barrows, certainly the most common Barrows on the market. And don't feel forced to buy a pre-powered Barrow, for example. If you've got a Barrow, you can absolutely more than likely convert it to being powered and save yourself a lot of money and have it done properly, like I say, with lithium or LiFePO4 batteries, not lead acid, and it's all done decently. You know, there's no budget cuts. As I say, although this is a budget kit, it's still, you know, a good quality kit. It's not cheap, it's not nasty, and it means it's going to last for a decent amount of time as well. And of course, the main thing is yeah, you can outsource, you can get bits and pieces here, there and everywhere, but in terms of warranty and keeping your eggs all in one basket, then in my opinion, it certainly makes sense to buy everything in one kit from one place, meaning that all your eggs are in the same basket and you've got a UK-based warranty. Because of course, if you're outsourcing parts, then of course you may not have warranty with certain things like that as well. So if you are looking for a conversion kit, whether it be a premium or budget kit, take a look on our website. If you've already purchased a kit, then hopefully this video helps you know how to fit it. Or if you're interested in one of our kits, then hopefully this may just help you cross that line and go ahead and purchase one. So hope this video helps. If you've got any comments, anything that I've missed, any questions, feel free to ask below and I'll try and help you when I can. Otherwise, take care.